Sometimes I wonder if it's easier or harder to be in business as someone who does something that's a little taboo, someone that starts a conversation that we don't, as a society, usually want to talk about. And today, my guest, Myisha Battle, is one of those people. She's someone who talks very openly about the work that she does and attracts clients to her sex and dating coach work. In 2023, her first book came out, which is called This Is Supposed to Be Fun: The Joy of Hooking Up. And she is the host of not one, not two, but three different podcasts. So she knows how to talk about this stuff. And I'm so honored that today we got to talk about everything that brought her up to this moment and this, in some ways like linear career path. Like she's been interested in sex and psychology with a feminist lens from a young age. But when I met Myisha a long time ago, she actually was working part-time retail and she wasn't like fully 100% spending her time on her business. That was many years ago. Fast forward to today, she's literally about to move all of her things into her own office space that she can afford because she's doing so well. So I feel like hers is a story of really sticking with something and believing in it and continuing to have the perseverance and grit to see something through. So I hope you'll enjoy this listen and stick with us. I was just revisiting our email correspondence throughout time as a reminder of when we met and how we met. And I'm glad I did because it jogged my memory. I think the first way that we met was through my former business, the Women's Space, and you hosted an event there.
Hmm.
Does that
Yeah.
check out with you? Okay. And that was
Yeah.
in 2017.
It was a while ago. It was like right when I launched my business. I launched in February of 2016.
Mm.
So yeah, it was my like first year of being in business and trying to find community around what I was doing.
And you were San Francisco Bay Area based then and now, but you were coming over to visit Brooklyn, which is where my event space was.
Hmm.
Well, that could be kind of a cool place to start. What do you remember about that time?
Hmm. Well, what I remember about that time, in short, is it was very chaotic looking back on it. And I think that that is true for a lot of people starting out their own businesses. You don't really know what you're doing, and you're just throwing a bunch of things against the wall to see what sticks. And for me, being in the sexological world, um, I was seeing I was seeing a little bit of what that could look like, and it didn't resonate with me directly, meaning like promoting my work through like using myself as the thing. And I don't have a judgment against people who do that because it works. But it didn't feel right for me. So I had to consider what were the places, spaces, communities, people that I could align myself with to what I felt would like legitimize the work.
Mm.
Because in 2016, I don't think a lot of people knew what a sex coach was. Even to this day, I still get that question, but there's a better understanding of what it is now. But back then, it was really difficult to explain to people what I did or what I was trying to do at that point.
Right, right. I can see why that's an important contextual reality to remember that
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of history, in a relatively short amount of time, things have changed there in terms of awareness, but at the time made it even more pioneering to enter this role or into this space. You said I was in the such sexuological sex can't can't say it right. But like what does that mean?
Yeah, so sexology is the study of sex, and believe it or not, it's a field that's been around for a really long time and has this sort of parallel trajectory to psychology. And there's a lot of overlap. My master's series in psychology. It's why we have, you know, this tension between things that were categorized as paraphilias or aberrant behaviors in former DSM volumes or editions versus now where we consider BDSM, for instance, like a sexual expression, but not necessarily something that is going to cause you mental distress. So yeah, so along with psychology, there was this field of sexology, and it's had a lot of ebbs and flows and its own weirdnesses, as any field has. But my practical skills that I developed to work with clients are based on the framework of coaching. So the founder of the training program that I went through, which was called Sex Coach U, she's kind of the foremother of sex coaching.
Did this field of study enter your master's work, or was it almost after that?
It was nearly after. So I am a career changer. In my early 30s, I decided to go back to school, get my master's degree in psychology. And I went to the new school in New York specifically because they have a feeder program. So you get your master's and then you can decide to apply to the PhD and you kind of continue on with your cohort. Um, I decided to not continue on because I realized that I wanted to work with a population that was, for the most part, well. Coaching, you're working with populations that are pretty resourced. So they're either working with a psychologist or feel they don't need to work with a psychologist. They work with me to, create an action plan around their sex and dating life, which is different. So I had to go through that path to decide whether or not I wanted to go the therapy route, the psychologist route, and then add another layer of certification on to become a sex therapist, or to take my master's in what I learned and what I studied specifically was like feminist psychology, and use that as the platform, as the foundation for looking at sex issues and partnership and helping people to kind of examine the ways that they wanted to express themselves sexually. I mean, along with feminist studies, is also like queer studies, trans studies. So, Black studies, there's all kinds of intersections there that I really appreciate and bring to my work. And I was like, well, I could just take this, but I need something else. Like I felt that I needed something else to give me the actual practical
Right.
training to work with clients. And through a series of events, which I can share or not, it's up to you. I found Dr. Patty Britton, who's the founder of Sex Coach U.
I want to hear about the evolution of your own clarity that that was a direction you wanted to go in, because like you said, you were studying something that has a lot of intersectional overlapping places that you could, put a pin in, set your sights on that one inroad to this feminist work in general. How did sex show up as the entry point?
Yeah, pun intended.
I know.
I will always pick up a sex pun. It's in me. Yeah. So my interest in sex goes back to, believe it or not, middle school, where I was trained as a peer counselor. I don't even know how I was picked or if I volunteered. I don't know. But I did end up like receiving training and then, taught, okay, these are the issues that if someone talks to you about, you escalate to an adult. So that's kind of what the framework was, is that you're the first kind of point of contact, and then maybe you just help them and that's fine. Or maybe there's an issue that goes beyond that. But I didn't talk to any of my peers about the things they were like training us for. All they wanted to talk to me about was like dating and, what was happening for them, what they wanted to do versus what was right to do. And this was in the Bible Belt South, so not a lot of good sex education. And that meant that there were a lot of unanswered questions, and I didn't have the answers to them. And I didn't know an adult to ask these questions of, because they felt so personal and so tender, you know? I did end up like talking to older friends of mine who were like cooler about it. And they were like, well, this isn't even a thing. Like once you're out of middle school, it's just like normal. And I'm like, what? But until then, what do we do?
What was that like to be trained for something and then realize you're going to be consulted or confided in around this topic that hadn't even necessarily been brought up in your training?
it was surprising to me, but it also made a lot of sense. And I think as I've gotten older, the thing that has really stuck with me is I was really upset that we had such terrible sex education, and I haven't been able to put my finger on why. And maybe I did know back then that it was kind of an affront to everything that we were being told as these quote unquote gifted students, that we should learn everything and like be the best at any subject and excel, excel, excel in your learning, no matter what, you know? And then there was this subject that was just shrouded in mystery. My sex ed textbooks, which were new for the year that I was receiving it, I think it was probably seventh grade, were taken by a group of concerned parents the week before we were to get them, and they were blacked out with Sharpie marker. And so that was also like no other subject has a group of
Mm,
parents like touched our textbooks. I mean, we're living in different times now where I think like this is maybe happening more frequently to other subjects, even. But to me, it just seemed wrong. And like I said, I don't know if I put that together then, but as an adult
mm,
looking back now, I
mm.
do feel that that was an injustice that we
Uh-huh.
all received, and a just a confusing set of logic there.
Right.
Um, and so it was surprising that I was hearing all of this, and yet it made a lot of sense because of the void. And this has continued to be an issue, right? So I fast forward, I went to college and I focused on health education and specifically sex education, and learned about the history and turmoils of the United States trying to implement a federal sex education program, which, oh my God, we were on the right track for like a hot second. And then, the bushes basically. Um, and yeah, I think after I internalized all of this, the struggle of how difficult it is for every state to implement culturally competent, comprehensive sex education. I went abroad and studied sex and gender in the Netherlands, and was like, oh, this is also really culturally
Mm.
dependent. You know, how much information you get, how like comfortable a society is with sex, how often they talk about it, who they talk about it with. And so it really opened my eyes to the fact that we could be doing things differently. But even there, I got questions. So anytime I tell people what I do, from that time, the peer counselor, I'm a peer counselor, I'm open. Anything you want to ask me, ask. Like,
Right.
people have been asking me about sex. And it's when I say I study sex education, okay, here's a million questions. And then when I was in Amsterdam, same thing.
I
So
believe it.
yeah, this just continues to be something that people want to talk about, don't know how to talk about, and a service that I provide that gives people the space to do that.
Right. Well, you were selected for this initial peer counseling based on being in the gifted and talented program, sort of like your academic prowess. And yet to hold these questions and hold the people asking them in the vulnerability, it's a total, it's not just how smart you are, right? It's about something much more um, energetic or human. This is a little toot your own horn moment, maybe, but like, what do you think makes you good at being the receiver and the holder of this sometimes thought of as taboo topic?
Yeah, I think there's two parts to it. One, I'm just endlessly curious about sex and relationships, and I can hold that curiosity with non-judgment. And that's a big piece of feedback that I get from my clients. I have a session at the end of our time together where we recap everything, and I take feedback, of course. And the feedback is that it's like the first space that people have had, no judgment about this aspect of their life. And that's that really is at the heart of what I provide people. It's like, it is that, tell me anything. I'm here to listen. obviously there's more to it because I know a lot about sex and I can guide people to resources. But I think like at the core, it's something that I've been doing since I was in middle school where I literally didn't know the answers. I couldn't tell people, for instance, the thing that sticks in my mind the most is like a friend of mine coming to me and being like, my boyfriend wants to finger me and I don't know if I should let him. Right. And she was both excited and scared and worried about what it would mean about her reputation if she allowed this thing that she wanted to happen. And she just wanted a question of, is it right or wrong? I was 12 years old, so I don't know what I told her, but I know that I didn't know what was right or wrong because that was one of the instances that I took to a friend and said, listen, somebody came to me and I don't know what to tell her. Is this right? Like, is this okay? Is she
Mm.
ready? And ultimately, all of those questions are so personal, and a lot of us just don't get an opportunity to sit with them and allow ourselves to come to the right decision for us. And then also talk through the very real implications of our behaviors based on our gender, based on our race, based on our class, based on our, economic. Like there's so much that these actions can mean. And I think that's worth exploring too.
Right, right. Well, uh, I'm not surprised that your two-part answer, it's almost strikes me as opposite sides of the same coin of like being a really endlessly curious person. I've heard in the past that the opposite of judgment is openness and curiosity. And so you are able to offer your clients and, you know, people asking you on the street that feeling of like receptiveness, open-mindedness. And then it sounds like, I know we haven't excavated your whole journey yet, but you have these academic lenses by which to see, these different intersectional layers. Then the coaching kind of also helps you with the tools to just like map it onto a true conversation into a person and really like bridge that divide of sort of the theoretical to the applied. So no wonder you're good at your job.
Thank you. Yes, I like to think so.
Yeah. We haven't even kind of begun to talk about the how do you build a business from there. And I know that there was another point when we were speaking and interacting, but maybe back in 2017, 2018. And I know you had to take on a part-time job while growing your business. Maybe you would even take us back further, but what were some of the kind of critical stages of business building around this for you?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I've never been good with money. And that's something that is in my family history as well. So, and that's true for a lot of people. Like, a lot of people that I know who are really good with money are so because they had that foundational teaching from family or they have, someone who kind of took them under their wing. And so starting a business, I didn't know exactly what I needed. I didn't know what kind of runway. I just knew I needed to support myself. So, yeah, for the first 4 years of the business, I was working either part time or full time retail. And I mean, interestingly enough, there are things from those jobs that I still use because I worked for two pretty high touch retail companies. And so, like, a lot of their training and development, because I overachiever, would always, like, within months or something stupid, like, be a manager. Um, so I got a lot of training for, for that. And yeah, just engaging with people around sensitive subjects like skincare. What are your concerns with your skin? It's like very touchy for people, learning
Mhm.
how to approach that and also provide solutions, suggestions, hold emotional space for whatever comes up, as a result of your questions. And then also with like, fashion and things like that. It's a personal choice and can sometimes be emotional, or people are buying gifts and it's sensitive. Yeah. So there was a lot that I pulled from that, and it felt necessary financially. And there were these benefits to working directly with, populations, um, where things shifted for me is in that second retail job. I was also working for Sex Coach U. At some point, I had like 4 jobs. It was really, there was a lot going on. This was right before the pandemic, was when everything kind of hit. I was working a lot. Through my job working for Sex Coach U, got connected to another sex coach who was offering a training on how she worked with clients. And I pulled a lot from her and that I started using how to structure my coaching packages, for instance, how to, use a bit of psychological tactics to come up with pricing that people couldn't automatically like do the math and come up with like, oh, you're this much per session. Like that seems unreasonable, right? You're just like, there's ways that you can finagle this that I learned from her and that were very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And once I started using that, that's when the rubber started to meet the road. And I was, getting people that number one were committing to larger dollar values. And also I was not having that churn and burn of having to come up with new strategies to bring people into the pipeline. And then they would just leave, after 1 or 2 sessions, right? So I was getting people to commit to longer periods of time with me. And that gave me the financial freedom that I ultimately needed to leave those positions. But yeah,
Are you able?
I just want to add that I put in my notice to
Mm,
leave at the end of February 2020. So I launched like officially in the middle of a global pandemic. Yeah, it was
how do you look back on that timing? Was the pandemic ultimately good or bad for
it was
business?
great for business. It was great for business. It was actually kind of divine timing. A lot of people were home. A lot of people were thinking through their relationships, wondering how to make improvements, wondering if this is the relationship they should stay in because of sexual, misalignment. So yes, it was 2020 was a
Mm,
great year. It was either 2021 or 2022 that was a real stinker, but yeah,
interesting.
2020 was great.
So I was also thinking that, I don't know, maybe there was a general cloud of anxiety and fear over 2020, but also I'm forgetting now when people were spending money on their home or felt like they had this disposable income that they weren't spending out at,
Yeah,
the movie theater, restaurants that could be reapportioned.
right. Yes. I do think people were thinking of this as, hey, that thing that we've been putting off investing any time or energy in? Well, we're kind of stuck here together and we need to figure this out. And we do have a little bit of that extra cash. So,
Right.
yeah.
I am putting myself in the shoes of a listener who probably heard about this important mentorship moment of sorts, or like learning where you kind of got the inside scoop of some tactics. If you were to summarize what the heart of that shift was about, is it like a value-based pricing of like, instead of speaking to sort of the individual steps, it's kind of thinking about the change that someone's going to make? Or what did you actually do to move away from that churn and burn cycle?
I really did have to believe in the value. And I think that was one of the big overarching pieces of commentary during that workshop series that I went through, because I think it was maybe 4 different work. And by the way, like I kind of finagled it because I was working for Sex Coach U, and so I got either discount pricing or free pricing to attend this. So listen, that's another thing. I'm all about a barter. I was so bartering at the beginning of my career. Anything you can do if you're drawn towards it and you can come up with some way to make it financially viable for yourself, do it. Because it's all knowledge. You don't have to use all of it. And I didn't use all of the information that I got. But what I did take away was that this is a valuable service. And when we undercut the value of it and we charge less because we're doing good, we are actually saying to the world that this is not valuable. And I am as anti-capitalist as as one can be at this stage in my life. Like I'm really there, but I still have to eat and I like nice things. And like this is the world we live in, right? And I can't consider that just because this is a good thing, that it doesn't have monetary value and that I
Mhm.
can't benefit from that. Do I make a shit ton of money? No, but I make a good living and I live in one of the most expensive cities in the world.
Mhm.
Like I
Mhm.
do have to remind myself that I have like created a system that does support the life that I wanted. And I'm really, really grateful for that. And I know how much work it took. But yeah, first and foremost, it was like people will want to undervalue you. Don't let them. You know,
Mhm.
people will want you to work for free and do things for free or for, promotional purposes. And sometimes that is good and sometimes it's not going to work for you. But what you do need is when people do come to you and want to utilize your services, you have to have something that you feel like you can stand behind, not only the structure that's in place, but also the price of it. And
Mhm.
I've raised my prices once since I've been doing this. Well, I was doing like a different structure altogether, but after this, I'm doing 3 months and then people can extend after that in different ways. I offer that. And I was doing like a package of 4, something like that. And I don't do that anymore. So yeah, it was really about, okay, what's the number? And she had a lot of really great worksheets for, what is your target income? Then work back from that. And how much do you want to work?
Right.
And then that's your price. Like you've got to figure out how to make that with with the amount of clients that you want to see. So obviously the less you want to work, the more you have to charge. Do you feel comfortable doing that? Maybe yes, maybe no. So that
Yeah.
was really helpful for me to strategize
Mm.
around.
You've just given great voice to the client work. It feels like that's a big pillar of maybe even the heart of the business. And then I also know that you've written a book, you have multiple podcasts, you're a contributing writer, or I've seen some articles published. So my sense is that you have this, um, I don't know, almost picture like a planetary system or something, all these like beautiful stars kind of circulating and drawing light back onto the main offering. Um, could you share a little bit about how you think about your content constellation?
I actually really appreciate that framing of it because
Mm.
it does feel like that. It's like at the heart, I'm a sex coach. I do dating coaching, but my training is in sex coaching. I'm a sexologist, and I know not everybody is going to want that, So it was about the book idea was really about how do I reach people who wouldn't become coaching clients, who maybe they get chunks of information that they can use, um, but maybe some of them read the book and then they're like, this woman's great. I want to work with her. So it was a little bit of that conversion, but it was more marketing. And again, like my focus, honestly, from day one was just to legitimize the work, you know? Um, so partnering with organizations or working with groups that I felt had more of a platform than I did and making work that I could stand by that was really using my voice and my perspective, always coming back to that, feminist perspective and how I wanted people to think about dating and sex and relationships. And so that's how the book turned out as well. I wanted a book that had my tone, had the way that I would coach people, had exercises that people could really sink their teeth into.
Yeah.
In the event that they like didn't have the income to work with me or
Mhm.
had no interest or idea that there was something like what I do.
It strikes me that it's serving the kind of the role it's playing in your business is, yes, it's like spreading the word. It's a marketing piece of the puzzle. But so much of your journey has been around awareness of poor sex education. And I hear in what you're sharing with me, just like this return to getting out information. People can take what they want from it. You've done that in your own career and sort of just ingesting and being curious and then being able um, to do that curational piece of like, well, what do I want to take from this? So it seems very fitting that you would write a book. Do you feel like it has been playing the role that you hoped it would be?
Yeah, I do. I've gotten some
Mhm.
really positive feedback about, people who are like, I've read the book, I applied what was in it, I'm having a better time dating, or I've had more positive sexual experiences. I think that's fantastic. And then clients who have come to me. So the book came out in 2023. And
What's it
since then
called?
it's called This Is Supposed to Be Fun, How to Find Joy in Hooking Up, Settling Down, and Everything in Between. And yeah, so I have had clients who have started working with me who have read the book. And that's really fun too, because I'm like, oh, tell me about the exercise that you did, because that would be something that I would, you know, want to give you as a client, but you've already done it. So that let's take a look at it and let's go deeper. That's always really fun.
That's awesome. It's almost like they've had a conversation or a long conversation with you ahead of time that you can kind of build off of.
For
Hmm.
sure.
And then
Yeah.
I think I caught that your last email or your website, somewhere there was a mention of press inquiries. So do you
Mm.
have added support at this point to kind of get the word out in other more traditional ways via a press agent?
I don't actually.
Oh,
So
okay.
that PR contact is through Seal Press, who handle the book.
I
So
see. Okay.
that's on the website for people who are interested in, following up with me. And I still get press requests through them, which is great. And press has been like so fucking good to me. I'm not even gonna like that. I am Gemini rising. I love to talk. Like you said, I've done 3 podcasts. Like I have the gift of gab, and I love talking to people about the work that I do. So for me, that has been like, I love guesting on podcasts. I love writing articles. So I do have a column for Time Magazine, which has been amazing. And so I get people who have read a piece and they want to
Mm.
do a news piece about what I've written about, which is, I mean, I would not have predicted this. I actually try, because Time has such a huge reach, to just like not think about how many people might be reading it, because it's pretty scary. And I don't read comments, but I do love, the occasional email that I get from readers, or the press requests that come through based on certain topics that I have decided to cover. And that's just me here in my little brain being like, I want to write about this. There's nobody telling me what to write. So
So are you
I've
pitching these stories and they're
yeah,
getting picked up?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's been remarkable, and
Mm.
so rewarding, because at the end of the day, my last podcast was through KCRW, which is, public radio network, all of that access. And if I could tell that little 12-year-old girl that, like, one day you're going to be writing for Time Magazine, you'll have a published book, and, people on public radio are going to be listening to what you have to say about sex. It's like unbelievable. Unbelievable. I
Mm.
don't think that she would have been able to comprehend that.
Hmm. Yeah, when you lay it out like that, it's very impressive what you've built, and I know a lot of hard work went into it. How else do you explain your success, for lack of a better word?
Um, I'm really tenacious. I'm very organized.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I said Gemini rising, but I'm Virgo. I'm Virgo's sun. And I am a detailed thinker, but I'm also concise, which is, I'd like never turned in papers that were the length that you should be. It just didn't work for me. And it's something that I'm actually like working on, being a lot more like thorough and spreading a point out, because I'm
Interesting.
like, this is it. Like, I've done all the work for you. I can condense it and just tell you. Um, that's always how my brain has worked.
Mm.
But yeah, in terms of like writing the book, when people say it's a chore to write, that's another thing that I don't understand. Like, I
Mm.
really love writing, and have gotten tendonitis as a result of writing. And it sucks,
Mm.
but it's also, it's like war pain. I've like gone through the process and come out with my scars of survival. Um,
We're counting now.
Yeah,
I think
there's
that we
that.
once got like lunch together, maybe shortly after you had been on a writing retreat.
Mm,
Does that ring a bell? Like you set aside some structured time to do to earn your tendonitis. Is that
yes,
yeah?
yes. I
Okay.
did. I have extended family that has like a tiny cabin in the woods in um like upstate Michigan, not the Upper Peninsula for those of you who know Michigan, but uh near Traverse City, where my family is from. And no electricity, no indoor toilet, little outhouse situation. And I was there in like for a week in late September, which was beautiful. And I basically wrote the first half of the book.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, it's helpful to hear. I think that for anyone who's ever fantasized about writing a book, that it doesn't have to be all a grind and it can be enjoyable. Um,
Yes.
I want to return to something that you and I were talking about before we hopped on to record, which was this idea around the form of your business matching sort of the impact that you want to make, or how would you give voice to it? So I think we're kind of talking about your ecosystem, and it feels like we're warming up to something around the shape of your business.
Yes. And it was just when we were talking earlier that I kind of came upon the notion that applies to so many things, but I do think it applies to my business, which is, form follows function. This also feels like a very Virgo thing. But it helps. I mean, it helps me, and I think it's been guiding me on a subconscious level. But I've also had really good exposure to other feminist-based businesses that run differently than, say, your typical corporate structure.
So, what is form following function? I'll challenge you to expand.
Yeah, for me, form following function means, especially if you are a business owner or you are the person driving the major business decisions for your company, you really get to shape things based on, like you said, the impact that you want to have or the function that you want to serve for your clients. And that ultimately like has no restrictions. The shape of it can take so many different forms. The thing that I think people get really caught up on is that they have to do things a certain way in a certain order to be successful. And I just consistently found that to be false for myself. In fact, if I had followed all of the rules of marketing, of content engagement, of like how many followers you're supposed to have, and all of these things, I actually probably would not be in business because I wouldn't be doing the actual work that I'm good at, which is coaching. I would be very distracted by all of these other metrics and markers of success rather than, you know, am I happy? Am I burnt out? Like, do I need time to step away from the business to recuperate, Um, so for me on a practical level, what this looks like is yes, I have a 3-month coaching package. Yes, we meet every 2 weeks. Am I a stickler about that? No. And when I have clients who are dealing with outside issues that are taking their focus, that they absolutely need to be present for, I will recommend a pause. I will recommend that they take time for themselves because that in and of itself is a learning. And it's about everything that I believe we should have in this world, which is, you know, yeah, great. You paid all this money, you signed up for this service, and part of the service is showing you that your priorities will ebb and flow and change, and sex may be deprioritized from time to time. And that is okay because you can always come back to it. There's a tremendous amount of fear, generally, just in the world. I'll just say that. But there's also a tremendous amount of fear for those of us who are, bought into the optimization model of life. which is you do a thing until you perfect a thing and then you move on to the next thing. That's not how life fucking works, you know? Like your sex life is never going to be perfect. It's going to be good and it's going to be fun and you're going to have some amazing times sometimes, but like optimizing that is not the goal. The goal is to recognize the times when it's really good, pull back when you think, hey, the conditions are not great for this right now, and then return when you're like, I love these conditions for us. You know, this is it. This is the time. And sometimes that's vacation, you know? So, yes, I think that like the way that I support my clients is by changing the form when I need to. And looking at the form from time to time for myself and asking, is this the shape of the work that I want to continue to do? And so this year, because I have a secret socialist agenda, I'm starting to write more in my personal, well, my business newsletter, but my newsletter is now me writing about things that I care about that I see are tying in to sex. I do think economics play a role in how we're experiencing our sex lives. I do think that the current political moment should not be dismissed as, you know, something that's happening over there and not having real world implications, because I'm seeing it in my practice every single day. I'm seeing trans clients who are terrified. I'm seeing couples who are absolutely filled with fear to the point where maybe sex isn't the thing that we need to be working on right now. And I want to give people the opportunity to take care of themselves, find a sense of safety and grounding, and then come back to this work when they feel ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if an alternative word around form is like structure is also what's coming to my mind, right? Like the structure, the cadence of like, okay, we committed to this coaching rhythm or tempo together, and we also get to hold it lightly, to be adaptable to kind of like our human needs and reality as it evolves. Maybe it's not surprising then that these words form and structure are also coming with the sense of like adaptiveness and being responsive to like the fact that you're not putting yourself in such a tight box and giving yourself permission to talk about things outside of the like very niche, dialed in, constrained topic of, you know, sex and relationships only, but you're giving yourself permission to be responsive.
Yes. What I believe so wholeheartedly is that we're not these fragmented pieces. We are whole human beings who are impacted by all aspects of life. And our sex life is impacted by all these different aspects of our life. The flip side of that is that making changes in your sex life also has a ripple effect in all aspects of your life. And what I see is if I'm able to meet people in their vulnerability of, even if it's just like, hey, I showed up to this call, I'm feeling really sick, I'm not feeling great today. I'm like, you know, let's check in. Let's do a half an hour now. Let's save that half hour for another time. You know, I always allow for that to be a possibility, and just the relief that people feel, because what we don't realize is how regimented our lives actually are and how dictated by other people's demands on our time our lives are. So if I can give people a tiny glimpse of like what it's like to really be free, to be like, I don't feel it. Like this is a perfect way to practice the skill of telling a partner you don't want to have sex with them. You know what I mean? So I see them as very interwoven and important, and they work in tandem with each other. Like I just see people show up with such heavy hearts and like guilt, and when there are real and valid reasons why they can't actually fully devote themselves to the work that they signed up for. And I think that is fine. I think that is okay. And I think that because of the structure that I've put in place, because people are paying me monthly and like, we're fine, cool. We need to have some flexibility around scheduling. Great. Let's do it. Let's do it, because I know it's going to be more supportive to you in the long run, and you're going to be developing skills of self-advocacy also in the process.
So maybe taking this to the extreme, the other side of it, which is like, how do you know when you're being so flexible that maybe like a boundary is being pushed on?
Yeah, it's happened. Um, and mostly, you know what? I have such lovely clients. Um, so it mostly works itself out. I mean, it's hard for me to address this without, because I don't have any ill will towards people who, in my opinion, have such blocks, either around sex or, looking at this part of their life. I don't blame them for that. Then there are like real considerations, which are related to potential neurodivergence, ADHD. I didn't put this in my calendar for the 5th time. Okay, that sucks. It sucks for me because I showed up here and you didn't, and I'm chasing after you. But for the most part, I've had clients who have just kind of really gotten on board. And then the other flexibility piece is like, what do you need from me to be able to commit to this? And sometimes for a long time, I didn't do calendar invites because early on in my career, someone was like, yeah, I don't need that. Like, I have my own system. And I was like, you know what? I have my own system too. And I kind of think calendar invites are annoying. So I'm going to not use them. Now I use them because it's happened to me enough times that people do struggle either with that executive functioning problem or they have some resistance. And, sometimes we have to talk about the resistance.
Right, right. Well, that's good to hear that for the most part, it hasn't really been an issue. That feels true to me and the clients I work with as well.
Good.
I mean, it sounds like a lot's going well right now. It makes me wonder, like, do you have a dream for your business right now? What would be dreamy?
Yeah, right now I'm moving into a new and my first ever, like, solely my own office space, predominantly to give me the space to write my next book, which will be coming out in April of 2026. But that's all I can say about it right now.
You already sold it?
Yes.
Or great.
Yes, we just need to sign that contract. But it's in the works.
Nice.
So yeah, that's exciting for me. I love writing, as I mentioned, and having this opportunity is really great.
You're gonna have electricity and
I will
toilet.
have. You know what? The building pays electricity, so I can use all the electricity that I want.
That's great.
It's great. And the other thing that I am really excited about is writing more directly to my newsletter subscribers. I think I really struggled early on to understand how I wanted to approach a newsletter. And so I just didn't do it. And then I had a team that was writing them for me for a little while where I would like do final edits and kind of make sure it was in my voice. Seems like people did not know that it was not me, which was great. But now, as I mentioned, I'm taking this on as a weekly newsletter, and I've been able to successfully do that so far the last couple of months because I do feel called to speak more about the things that I'm seeing in the world that are wrong, that are just wrong. And I don't care if people think that it's out of my lane. At this point, it's like, it's what I can do with what I have. And I feel like if I have an engaged newsletter list, I can be telling them the things that I think are wrong and also providing resources. So the other thing I wanted to do was offer some relief, and it's serving that purpose too, where I'm sharing stories of connection and different types of relationships. And, pleasure is really the goal. So the newsletter that I've launched this year is called The Pleasure Dispatch. And that's really the kind of guiding principle for it, is trying to bring people that moment of thoughtfulness, but also it's not scary. And I've shared more about myself in the newsletter. So that's
awesome.
Been feeling good too.
I was thinking about how to talk about sex for a lot of people is a vulnerable, therefore brave thing to do. maybe you're probably so practiced at even just telling your story and thinking back to even like, your 14-year-old self who was doing that peer counseling. And I guess when we look back, it sounds like, okay, yeah, I just accepted, this is what I did. I followed this path. It has sort of like this calm, like evenness to it almost. And what I pick up in hearing about this newsletter is just like, there's a little bit of bravery that's showing up to talk about things outside of the realm, or that someone might deem outside or need a little bit longer to see how it really does tie back to pleasure or sex and relationships. Do you think of yourself as a brave person?
Yeah, I do. I think I always have thought that. There's something about being the child of an interracial relationship that required a lot of bravery, especially as I mentioned in the Bible Belt South. And I wrote about this in my newsletter recently. It's a story I haven't really shared with people, certainly not my clients who are also subscribers. So they're like, oh, wow, thank you for this. But yeah, I mean, listen, I'm like established 1982, been like challenging racist since like what, 1990? Like this is nothing new for me. But it is a moment to like flex those skills or share that like we never lived in a post-racial society, guys. Like this is there are those of us out there who have known this, and many people were not listening, right? And I think that the release of 1,500 neo-Nazis back into the streets, like we can't just dismiss that as just a favor from Trump. That is strategic. And this pertains to me and my life. It pertains to the lives of many of the people that I serve and work with. And it's something that I can't not talk about anymore. It feels and I think doing that in this space feels safer, to be honest. Like I'm not someone who's going to get on social media and start,
the newsletter
focusing my
feels
content.
safer.
Yeah. So I am doing it in a strategic way that feels right for me, that I get to protect myself in the process and not be on the receiving end of terrible things.
My mind is going to the fact that, like, as a coach, you are much more, you're one-on-one. It's very personal. It's like all of your teachings and philosophy sort of, again, like applied. And, even that case that your friend came to you when you were in middle school of like, should I do this or not? Is this right or wrong? And you said, well, there's all these other questions I'd want to ask and get to know kind of like this individual person. Stepping into the writer's shoes through your newsletter, through book, you're not one-on-one. And so you're playing almost like a different role of educator, of thought leader, however you want to describe it. Sometimes I think about helping people understand their skill sets. And I think you're a shining example of someone who like doesn't have to be one or the other. Like you're able to, I mean, maybe communication is like one through line throughout all of this. But you're balancing, it seems like, these very dual complementary roles, if that makes sense. Like the person in the room applying it versus the publisher who's writing about it and spreading the ideas. Does that track with you?
Yeah, I think that anybody who chooses to work with me, they should know I'm a feminist. They should know that we're going to be talking about race, class, gender, all of the things, that comes with my perspective. It's why I find it very difficult. This just happened to me recently where a friend asked for a referral, and I don't know anybody else who's kind of applying the things that I apply in this way. So it's hard for me to be like, oh, this this person does this. And I know sex therapists, but they usually are full up because they are therapists, and therapists are very busy right now. So I do think that when people choose to work with me, they kind of know what they're signing up for, or at least I hope they do. And I do have that, let's pause. Let's talk about the thing that you just said so matter-of-factly and interrogate why you might feel that way or what cultural messages might be ingrained. And I do think I try to bring that to my writing too. It was really important to me in writing This Is Supposed to Be Fun that I gave the example to my publisher that it felt like this queer POC party that I attended at El Rio a few times, where essentially there was someone whose job it was to go up and down the line and bring people of color to the front and anybody who was unable to pay to the front. And if you were a white person, you kind of had to deal with that. Like it was a queer POC party. So they really were like making sure that it was an inclusive environment and that when you were in there, it felt like that. Like it didn't feel like we're just saying this, but we don't really practice this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I brought that to my publisher. I was like, I want people to pick this up and know, like, this is a queer book. It's a queer friendly book. You're included here. This is a, disability friendly environment. This is a space where we can talk about how all those things impact dating. And I think something that's very helpful to think about too is that, feminist research gave us this framing of disclosures, not exclusively divulging what university you're with and what your financial backing might be, but disclosures of your ethical perspectives. Like, I come to this research with this, or I am a person who has this background, and that's going to inform, number one, the research questions that I'm asking, and number two, the way in which I'm doing what I'm doing.
Right.
So I think about that a lot too, about having this as like, just because I write for Time, I don't feel like I'm obscuring any aspect of myself in this. If anything, I'm kind of like pushing myself to be more me in a space that feels a little, that is a little scary to be like, situationships are great. Here's why. Here's my experience, Not everybody's going to agree with that.
I mean, as a coach, at least in my coach training, we were kind of, it's not about me. It's not actually about telling my story. When I'm in a coaching session, I'm not like, oh, that happened to me, right? Like, I'm trying to center the client's experience, and it is different in different mediums or avenues, venues to start sharing about yourself. It sounds like through your newsletter, you are dialing up the amount that you're sharing. And I'll be curious to check in with you next time to see how that's, what that is set off for you. It's like kind of a chain reaction of different feedback that you're getting, different conversations that you find yourself in. I do think it does feel brave to share about our personal stories. So off you go again, dialing up the bravery.
I'm not good with just staying in one place.
Well,
yeah.
Where can our listeners find you? What's the best location now?
Yeah, I'm all over the internet at Myisha Battle. That's my handle, and also my website, myishabattle.com. And there are back episodes of How's Your Sex Life, which is the podcast I mentioned that I did with KCRW. Great, funny, amazing guests. We talk about vulnerability and how to have a threesome without having a third party, if that piques your interest. So yeah, it's really fun. And then my column for Time is called Real Love. So you can just search for that and you will find my stories.
Amazing. Well, thank you. You piqued my interest. I'm going to follow up on some of these things. And just so grateful for your attention and realness today. So thank you.
Thank you for having me, Melissa. This was so fun.
Yeah.
So the part of the conversation with Myisha that I want to double click on for the wrap up of our episode is about the pivotal moment where she ended up taking a workshop where she learned from someone who was already finding success as a sex and dating coach. And she got insight into this person's playbook who helped her basically walk through her pricing and the psychology, her own psychology of how much she felt comfortable charging. And I think hearing that when other sex and dating coaches charge less, they are in some ways kind of doing a disservice to other people who want to do it because they're lowering the bar of what is expected. And if everybody sort of holds the ceiling up and keeps advocating for the value of the work that they do by virtue of charging hearty, healthy prices, that helps everybody. But it wasn't until she really kind of saw that permission from someone else and probably literally talked about the cold hard numbers of what someone was charging before she felt like, okay, whoa, I think I can do something like this, or at least I can work my way up. So the strategy that comes to mind around pricing is like a value-based pricing. And it's hard because it's the most subjective of the pricing methodologies or perspectives, which is how much value do you think that your client or your customer is going to get from working from you? So how do you put a price tag on being happy in your life, in connecting with your partner, in feeling like your sex life is in a good place, right? Like that's something that there's no rule book. But chances are, if you can see how impactful the work is that you're doing to people's quality of life, that you can charge accordingly. So of course it's helpful to kind of like do a little bit of research and talk to other people about, how much might you pay for this, but also tune into what's feeling good for you and what value you feel like your services really speak to. And then just try it out and test it and know that you can always change it, right? That's totally on you to be able to edit your pricing. So I think it helps to share and talk about how much we're charging, especially as women. And I hope that you don't feel shy about maybe asking or even seeking mentorship from other people in your field so you can feel emboldened to do what Myisha did. All right, everybody, that's it for today. Thanks for listening.